The next time you make a loaf of bread, don't just press start and walk away. Read your dough ball. Hello, bread machine lovers, bakers, homemakers. Welcome to Butterfly Meadows Homestead. I'm Dorinda. And today I want to talk to you about reading your dough ball. So what does that mean exactly? So a bread machine is a wonderful invention. It kneads the bread, the dough, it lets it rise in a nice warm environment for a given amount of time. It does the knockdown and it does the second rise, and then it does the bake, and in the end you come out with this beautiful loaf of bread that all you had to do basically was put the ingredients into the pan, set the settings on the bread machine, and walk away, right? Wrong. You should never just dump ingredients into your pan following a recipe. So perhaps you have a recipe and you follow it to the T. You weigh your ingredients and you put them all in the pan, put the pan in the bread machine and turn it on. And you never look at it again until it is finished. You are playing a very risky game when you do that. Although the bread machine is wonderful in what it does not take away from the fact that you need to read your dough ball. You need to look at what is happening in the bread machine when things begin to mix up. And the reason for this is there are many factors that determine how much liquid or how much flour a recipe may need. So the humidity in the air can affect how wet the dough gets. The flour that you buy, you may even buy the same brand of flour all the time, but perhaps that wheat was grown during a heavily rainy season or a very dry season. That is going to affect the protein in that flour, and that in turn is going to affect how much liquid the flour can absorb. And all over the country, flour is made from different wheats. There's hard wheat, there's soft wheat, there's all kinds of different wheat. And all of these wheats will absorb different amounts of water. That's why you cannot just take a bread recipe, follow it to the T, dump it in your bread machine, and expect to get perfect results. When you put the ingredients in the bread machine and you begin to mix it, then you need to read your dough ball. And that is why in all of my videos, most all of my videos, except maybe the older ones, you will see that I start out on the raw dough cycle and I let my dough mix on the raw dough cycle before I set it on the cycle that it is going to actually make on, because I want to be able to look at my dough, know if it needs more liquid or if it needs more flour. And also that extra kneading and rest cycle enriches the flavor and the texture of the bread. If you ever hear people who make bread by hand all the time, if you've ever heard any of them talk about, that they don't always use a mixer, or they don't like to use a bread machine because they like to feel the dough, that is because they have learned what the perfect dough ball feels like, and they don't want to give that up, because you can't tell in the bread machine unless you actually reach in and you touch your dough ball and you look at your dough ball. You're not going to know what that feels like. And this is why sometimes people get unsatisfactory results in their bread machine when they try a same recipe that someone else had excellent results with. So I want to help you troubleshoot those things today and talk about what you can do to increase your chances of getting that perfect loaf of bread every time you use your bread machine. The best time to check your dough ball is after that you put everything in the pan, you put it in the machine and turn it on. After about 5 to 7 minutes, you want to open the lid on your bread machine. You want to look into that bread pan and see what is going on with the dough. Now, if you see something that looks very dry, and I'm going to try to split the screen here and share with you a picture of a very dry shaggy, dry dough ball that is not sticking together, does not look smooth at all, then you need to add water. And you only want to add water about 1 tablespoon at a time. You add a tablespoon of water or 2 if it looks extremely dry, and then you let it mix for 3 or 4 more minutes and see how it's looking. And then if it's still extremely dry, then you add another tablespoon of water. You want to add the water sparingly, and you want to let it mix a few minutes before you decide if you need to add more, because once you get your loaf too wet, it's more difficult to fix, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. But you don't want an extremely dry dough ball, because if the dough is too dry, your dough ball is going to be very stiff and very firm, and it is okay to reach in and feel of that dough ball, because you really need to know what a good dough ball looks like and feels like. So reach in there and feel of it. If you feel that dough ball and it's very stiff and you can't really squeeze it that easily, it should be soft. I'm trying to think of something that is similar to what it should feel like, but it should be soft when you squeeze it, but not sloppy. But it should be soft. It should hold its shape, but you should be able to squeeze it and it be soft. You should be able to stretch it and it be soft. If it's crumbling, it's dry, or if it's very firm, extremely firm, then it's too dry. A dry dough ball is going to produce a very dense, it may not even be well mixed, it may not rise well, and your bread is going to be dry and crumbly. That's what you're going to get from a dough ball that is too dry. So now let's talk about, what if my dough ball is too wet? So a wet dough ball would be one that when it's mixing, it doesn't really form a good ball. Or perhaps it's trying to form a ball, but the shape is not round. And if you pause the machine, it just flattens out in the pan. That is too wet. And to fix that, you're going to have to add a tablespoon or 2 of flour at a time and let it mix for 3 or 4 minutes to see if it takes on a better shape. And like I said before, a wet dough ball can be much more difficult to fix than a dry dough ball. So I suggest that you always start out with a little bit less. If you've never made that recipe before, hold back, maybe a few tablespoons of the liquid in the recipe until you see how dry or how wet the dough ball is going to be. Because when you start adding flour to your recipe, you are increasing the volume of that dough ball, which is going to increase the size of the loaf that you are making. And sometimes it's just very difficult to get enough flour added to get that dough ball where you want it, depending on how much extra flour that you have to add. But a wet dough ball is going to produce a loaf that is likely going to sink in the middle. After, it'll rise up beautifully and bake and then sink on top. It may overrise and be very full of holes and still sink. Or it may be the texture on the inside may be gummy. Like maybe it looks good, but when you cut into it, the texture just feels a little off. It doesn't feel soft like sandwich bread should. It just feels a little bit wet, a little bit gummy. That's what happens when you have too much liquid in your dough ball. Another sign that your dough ball is too wet is the dough is sticking all around to the sides of the pan. It's not pulling away and leaving a nice clean pan on the inside. That means your dough ball is too wet. Now, another thing, now if it's really wet, you're just going to have to add flour. But another thing that you can do is allow it to mix longer, like give it an extra kneading cycle on the raw dough cycle, because oftentimes that will improve the texture of your dough ball before you have to keep adding flour. But you do want to get it to the place where it has a nice consistency, is pulling away from the pan, and holds a kind of a round shape when it's not kneading. So what does the perfect dough ball look like? The perfect dough ball is going to be nice and round as it's kneading. It just forms a ball. It pulls away from the pan and leaves a nice clean pan. And when you touch it, when you reach in to squeeze it and feel of it, it is soft. It's not firm and it's not sloppy wet, but it's soft. And it might be a little sticky, but it's not overly sticky. Like it might stick to your fingers a little bit, but it's not like, you know, you just are covered in dough after you touch the ball. So it'll be a nice, smooth shaped dough ball that holds its shape. If you pause the machine, it holds its shape. It doesn't go flat. And it's smooth. It pulled all the flour and everything away from the pan inside the pan. That is what a perfect dough ball looks like, and that is going to give you the best loaf of bread in the end. That is the kind of dough ball that you want. So a few more tips are, if you're adding enrichments like egg or mashed potatoes or potato flakes, you're gonna have to definitely watch the consistency of your dough ball. You may have to make adjustments to the liquid in the recipe. The weather can also play a part. If it's very humid or rainy or different things, that can affect the consistency of your dough ball. The most important thing is go slow. Don't overcorrect. Like, don't look in and say, well, that's way too dry, and add too much water. You know, add a tablespoon at a time, let it mix for a couple of minutes, and then see what you need to do. The same thing with flour. Add it slowly. Don't overcorrect, because then you're going to have to go and correct in the other direction. Now, I know this might sound like a lot, but after you begin doing this, you will get the hang of it. And when you look in at your dough ball, you will know immediately what you need to do. Don't be afraid to check on your dough ball. Don't be afraid to feel of your dough ball and learn what it feels like, learn what it looks like, and make notes of how the bread turned out in the end. So you can be sure that you are successful with every loaf of bread that you make. Listen to the dough ball. What is it trying to tell you? Because it will tell you what your bread is going to turn out in the end if you pay attention to what it looks like and what it feels like. And after you do this for a few times, you are going to feel like an expert, and it is going to be just second nature to you. And this will definitely help you be more successful with your bread machine. I hope you found this video helpful. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe if you have not already, and share this video with your friends. God bless. Bye-bye.